Hello, and welcome back to another episode here at the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Coleman. You know me as Smith of Smoke on the message boards, joined by the best colleagues and co-hosts that money can't buy. Will Massasak, you know him as Brad Shotabin, and Corey Karbowski, you know him as Corey39. Guys, I have to admit, a streak came to an end for me. Normally when I go to the Steelers Colts game here in Indianapolis, that normally results in a win. Now, then don't get me wrong. I knew going into this that the streak was going to end. Let's put any falsehoods to bed there. But, it's still kind of a sad thing that the streak comes to an end. I've enjoyed lauding it over the Colts people here for quite some time now that, they haven't beaten us in a while. So glad they can enjoy it in a season where they're not going to do anything either. But that remains yet to be seen. But yeah, not much to be said about this past game in Indianapolis, other than the fact of the matter is you get up 13-0 and then can't do anything the rest of the game. So not only was I late to this game because I went to the IU Kansas game before this, which is about an hour south of Indianapolis. So that's why I was late to this game. My first play was, as I was going up the escalator, was I could see through the beams in Lucas Oil, the punt block, which I thought went for a touchdown at the time, just because I was on the escalator. So I just assumed it went for a touchdown. To then just have the game totally turned on top of its head in Pittsburgh to play as bad as they did the rest of the game just kind of sucks.
Wait, Jeremy, just if I get to have this straight, the Steelers were like looking pretty good and they scored and they got a punt block, and then you entered the stadium and everything went downhill after you went in. Is that what you're trying to say?
It could be perceived that way, but I'm not sure I buy that logic. So, but yeah, honestly, just it's a shame that this team kind of just folds and quits on itself when the adversity side of things get going late in the year. See, it seems like this team's kind of just given up. They're not really playing for anything at this moment. One more loss and Mike Tomlin's not going to be able to hold on the never had a losing season argument anymore, which I can't wait for personally. But before we dive into all that, I mean, you guys have anything you want to say about what happened this past Saturday?
Well, wait, he has to lose two more to never have a losing 7-7, right?
Oh, fine. Yeah, two more. Let's act like it's not going to happen, but okay.
Oh yeah, man. They're going to rally. I think they're winning the next three.
Right.
Kenny's coming back. Actually, Rudolph is going to start. Yeah, whatever. I'm sorry that you had to be there to witness that in person, but yeah, it's this thing about them looking like they've given up. There have been sort of like inklings of that for a while now. But yeah, it really looked like it in this game. Like they just didn't really have the desire to get off the mat.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I mean, I even took a screenshot of something because I wanted to read this off here when I was getting stuff ready for this. Apparently, Rich Eisen, I don't know if he talked with Watt or this was a quote that was pulled or whatever, but this is a quote that SteelersDepot.com had. Rich Eisen, Watt said it is wild and that some of them don't even want to practice. It's what he said, or don't want to practice in the way that everyone's supposed to practice. He said that this past week, everyone did that, and then you see the result. Now you could sit there and say, then Tomlin's got to change his way, but TJ Watt also said that the younger generation takes criticism personally. So just kind of another little insight into how it doesn't really feel like this team is much of a team right now. I think you've got a lot of people just kind of playing for them to get their next bag. I mean, we can continue to go down this George Pickens hole, but I mean, good God, his effort has just been completely unacceptable for a professional football player, just in his responses and everything. I mean, just in general, not a great Saturday. Corey, is there anything you want to chip in from this Saturday, or do we really just want to just put this thing behind us?
Boring.
That's Steelers ball right now. So
that whole second half, anytime we touched the ball on offense, it was just a snooze fest. one thing I just wanted to talk about, how ridiculous is it that we start calling timeouts on the other team down 11 points,
That
which
was
is just
so
like
petty.
which is just like a sore loser thing. But then you don't even like pretend to go like for it's not like they ran up the score on us. Like there was no
We
unsportsmanlike.
punted from their side of midfield and then called timeouts later. It was like, hey man, if you're really going for broke, you might not want to punt when you're on the opponent's side of the field. Just saying.
I did want to ask you guys a question. So I found this ornament we've had for years. It is a Ben Roethlisberger ornament. I just wanted to let I wanted to know if you guys think I should get a Kenny Pickett ornament or if I should just leave Big Ben on the tree.
Well, this little, there is only one Kenny Pickett ornament. He is actually dresses on weekends for the Steelers. He plays pretty much like a Christmas ornament. So they throw the same number of interceptions and touchdowns. Yeah. I don't know, man. Like it's we have to talk about this on the show, but it's funny. It's like all of us had the same inclination, I think, when we started tonight, which was, do we really have to talk about the Steelers and the game they just played? Because it's depressing. It's depressing when you I said in the second half of the game when someone asked me what I thought of this team, I was like, worst Steelers team in 20 years, at least. So I don't know that 2003 team. Corey was still, I think, in embryo then, but
depends on the time of the season. But I was either one, maybe two.
But that 2003 team with Tommy Maddox, after the bloom had come off the rose for Tommy Maddox, was not a good team, and the quarterback play was really bad. But that team might actually have been better top to, other than quarterback, better top to bottom than this one. And if people were blaming the injuries, I'm like, I'm tired of hearing people talk about the injuries. For example, the opponent that the Steelers just played, the Indianapolis Colts, were on their second string quarterback, their fourth and fifth string running backs for most of that game. Their number one receiver was knocked out early in the game, and they just crushed the Steelers defense. So it's like, I don't. You can say, oh yeah, we lost all these middle linebackers and safeties. It's terrible, but every team is injured at this time of the year. Most teams have problems at least as bad as what the Steelers have. But it's at some point, when you're playing their second and third and fourth and fifth string guys, you have to be able to play better than that. And I think the difference at that point is, as Corey said, like motivation, or TJ Watt said, motivation. Like they're just, the guys some of them have realized it's not really in it for this year. And typically what happens if you have a good team is you get rid of those guys. You observe how they react in practice and playing on when the season is pretty much done and everybody knows it. But if you're not a good team, I don't know if you can you just afford to get rid of everybody? Maybe, I don't know. I don't think the Steelers have it in them to like fully rebuild. But to me, I said this last week on the show, they're just ripe for a rebuild. They're ripe for a completely new coaching staff, an overhaul of their principles on offense, and probably a new quarterback, and just like essentially rebuild with the youngest guys, and add speed in the defensive and offensive lines, and don't look back, right? But I just can't. I don't know. Can either of you imagine? I'll throw it to you. I mean, Corey, you see that happening?
No, not at all. I mean, this is something I wanted to touch on, was that we've been critical of the undrafted free agency classes that we've had for the past how many years, and that's a telltale sign when it seems like every year we just kind of half-ass that aspect of our team. It seems like we bring in guys we don't really have any intention of using. And then now that you have a position group that gets hard by injuries, you have to go outside the org for Mykal Walker. The guy you drafted, Mark Robinson, because Mark Robinson was a draft pick, wasn't he? He was seventh round. Yeah, Mark Robinson's a guy, and everyone thinks of him as an undrafted guy because that's where everyone thought he was going to go. But that's like the only late round guy that's on the team who's contributing.
Oh, Jalen Warren, but
Jalen Warren's undrafted.
Undrafted, yeah. But I'm just saying, it's like, yeah.
But I'm looking a lot at defense. Like, we've criticized these classes for years now, and a team like the Colts, who are battered, they have so many guys that they've had late round success with.
We've gotten to this thing, and I mentioned it every time we do cover the draft that the Steelers do for years now. it feels like day 3, they draft guys for 2 reasons: special teams. So they're drafting guys specifically for special teams play, not because they think they have upside. It's not like we're going to get this really talented guy and we're going to play him on special teams because we think he's going to be a starter someday. So these are guys that get niched into special teamers. And then the other one is filling roster spots. Like, well, when we go to training camp, we're gonna need an extra arm at quarterback, or we're gonna need an extra, something that we only have 5 guys right now, so we need to have 6 or 7. So let's draft one. Yeah, they don't really approach necessarily the end of the draft and the free agents looking for gems. They approach it more for like filling out their roster and filling out the guys that can play special teams. And I understand the need. It's a plus. Like choosing between 2 defensive players that you want to, you're thinking about drafting, and one of them is a really good special teamer and the other one doesn't play special teams. Yeah, that's a nice tiebreaker, because you know that their chance to stick on the team is if they can dress and play special teams. So that's great. But when you're drafting somebody or adding them mostly because they're a special teamer and not necessarily because you think they can play, the Killebrew logging significant snaps for the Steelers defense is not good. Great special teamer. He had that one bad day. But yeah, it's like, if you're dependent on guys like that to be your depth, then you're in bad shape.
Yeah, so I think that's one more thing actually that we need to kind of mention from this past Colts game, because kind of resulted in a big headline coming out of that game. DeMonte KZ had that big hit on Michael Pittman, which has resulted in a season-long indefinite suspension at this point. Even if the Steelers were to make the playoffs, he will not be playing. So just kind of curious what your guys' thoughts were. Live, it's always kind of hard to judge those things, especially because I was sitting in the 400, so in the end zone view from KZ's coming towards me making the hit. So I've seen replays. I understand, it was a dumb thing. It's like, you're going to get that. But I mean, he has to try to make some type of play there. So it's like, I don't understand how the NFL just automatically, cues in and says, okay, that was so egregious that, you're done for the rest of the year. Because I mean, some of the other things that they leaned on, to support his season-long suspension are a total joke. I mean, I saw one of them. It's just a hard tackle on a running back, not to the head or neck area. It's almost on his shoulder. I can't remember. I think it was like back in like week 6 or 9. I can't remember which game or who it was on, but it was like, that's part of their rationale that they're using to suspend him. So I don't know. I'm going to let you guys dive into this, because I think this is getting to like a very slippery slope with the NFL, because there's no clear definition or standard as to what, the last strike is when it comes to this type of thing. So I'll let you guys jump off here.
Are you talking more specifically the general rule or just this KZ hit?
I mean, we can go in a little bit of both, because I mean, I definitely think it's a penalty on KZ, obviously, but more of the result from the hit. Now that he's out indefinitely, I know he's going to appeal it, but I mean, let's face it, that's not going to really do anything if the NFL doesn't want it to.
Yeah, my issue with this is you're putting, and Tom Brady mentioned this, you're putting all the responsibility on the defensive backs, because I thought it looked like an really illegal hit at first, but then you look at it and he's turning his head, putting his shoulder to where the ball was, and so that, I think that alone makes an indefinite suspension. That's a joke. That's straight up. That's what it is. It's a joke for what he was attempting to do. That wasn't malicious, but I think Tom Brady has a very good point on this. And I mean, this is coming from a guy who threw his, a handful of hospital balls himself.
Sure.
Is one, if you want to put the responsibility on the DB to, protect the player, you also got to put it on the quarterback to protect his player. And then you also have to put on the receiver. If you don't want to get hit, don't leave your feet. I mean, that's kind of as simple as that. If you can hear footsteps, don't leave your feet as a receiver. because people want to, look at this perspective towards the DBs to where, oh, just let him catch the ball. It's not worth, ending someone's career over a pass breakup. Well, if you're a receiver, is it worth potentially ending your career for diving for a ball in a game that's, regular season game at that? So I'm not saying it's Michael Pittman's fault. I'm not saying it's Kazie's fault. I'm not saying it's Gardner Minshew's fault. But I don't think you can just go to the DB and say, it's on you to not injure a player, especially when it's not, if you spear someone, yeah. But that's not what we're talking about in this case. In this case, Kazie turned, led with the shoulder, put it where the ball was going. That's what you're supposed to do. He's not going to make a pass breakup throwing his hands in. That's just not going to happen. You got to put your shoulder to the ball, which is taught at all levels of football. So if you want to say it's on the DB, you can, but I think that's a flawed logic if you don't apply it to it's on the quarterback to not throw a ball 2 yards out in front of a receiver towards the split field safety on a crosser, so there's no protecting your body, and then it's on the receiver. You have to be aware of the risks if you leave your feet, especially if you lay all the way out as you're fading up the field. That's just something where even if he gets hit in the ribs, that could be a brutal injury. So I don't think for the DB you can say, oh, just let him catch it, because I think it equally falls on the receiver. Is that worth your body?
Yeah. I mean, guys, I'm like being older than you. I see plays like that. I just think that's football. Like, you'll never take the collisions out completely. And to me, I think if you want to implement a rule like this, then you have to really give the benefit of the doubt to the defensive player. So in other words, yes, the onus is on them, but you also have to give them the benefit of the doubt. In other words, if somebody is trying to, put their shoulder on the ball and the receiver bends down and puts his head in the line of fire, you can't blame the defensive back for that, especially since it happens so quickly and it's like a split second. I think the way the league legislates it now, both with the penalty and also with the suspension, is just, it was a really hard hit. It looked bad, and I think it also looked worse because, as you said, he turned and used his shoulder, but he lowered his head. So it's kind of
showed one replay. They showed one replay live where it looked like, it was helmet to helmet.
Right. I mean, it wasn't helmet to helmet, but because he lowered his head and attacked at the receiver at the catch point, it looked bad. And I'm sure that's why he got ejected. But it just sort of like, yeah, you made the point. It's silly to put all of the onus on somebody without giving them any room for margin for error, or for, like you said, the difference is a big difference between, you can tell some hits they're willfully trying to injure a guy. And for example, of something not like this that was penalized in the Cowboys game against Buffalo, Dak Prescott slid really late, and the defender actually went over top of him and avoided hitting him, but he grazed Dak Prescott's face mask with like his arm or something, and he got 15 yards for that. And it's like, okay, that, and not only that, then Zach Martin comes over and and headbutts him. It's sort of like the guy is like trying to avoid your quarterback so as not to kill him. And it was a really late slide, and still he got 15 for that. It's like some of these, some of what's expected for players to do is just silly. And some things that are just really hard hits. I think James Harrison probably had 5 personal foul penalties in his career that were mostly just because he really hit somebody hard. And it wasn't anything specifically illegal about it, except for he just hit him too hard. And that is the way that the league is now. And there's the fact that they, what I really liked about the spring leagues was that they all implemented this idea that these fouls are reviewable. And it wasn't like they stopped play to go see if something was a penalty, oh, we think there might have been what the college rule, the targeting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like if a foul was called like that, at least somebody looked at it. Now, they might have been pretty biased towards calling a penalty, but at least they examined it and said, for an example where somebody really wasn't hitting somebody with the helmet or whatever. So I do think that at the minimum, the NFL should institute review of any penalty like that. But the way that they're inclined to call it, I don't know that review will really matter that much, because they're just going to call you if you hit somebody hard and it looks bad, because that's really the reason they call these penalties is for their lawsuits and for their public, their PR, their public image. It has nothing to do with really caring about if players are safe or not. You cannot convince me that the NFL as an organization really gives a crap about player safety. I think they care about later. They don't want to get sued by players unions. They don't want to be paying dividends to players that were injured or that had CTE or whatever. Like that's the thing they're trying to avoid is the liability. But this is, it's just does it look bad? Is it going to be bad for our PR? Will it be bad for our lawyers in court? Call a penalty. Make it a penalty.
And this is slightly off topic, but it's kind of in the same genre. One thing, it's been driving me crazy, and it just hasn't really came up on this podcast, but the talk of banning the hip drop tackle is.
You know what the hip drop tackle is? We used to call that?
The hawk tackle. And it's absolutely ludicrous to me because I played throughout, this recent era of football. There's people my age going into the NFL right now. There's people who spent their middle school and high school years getting taught this specific form of tackle. When Seattle, the Legion of Boom, they had, number one defense in the league. They tackled and they rolled. That's called a hawk tackle. That's what I was taught from my second or third year of Pop Warner all the way up. Every single year, you tackle a dummy and you roll. Now you've taught an entire generation of people this, hip drop tackle. And, it's a physical game. But I can tell you what's going to happen is if they decide to do this, where this hip drop tackle gets banned, there's a lot of scenarios where someone's kind of in front. And what happens is they get dragged down because it's a big player they're trying to tackle. That's going to be classified as a hip drop tackle. So you see the ones where they're kind of in the back. They end up falling on a guy's shoulder, end up coming down. Really unlucky injury. That, one, I think it's really rare that it happens, especially leading to injury. I think it's a very common tackle if you just watch. But if they start flagging those, what's going to happen is even when someone's got a straight shot or even sideways, really, mostly it's corners right now who dive at ankles and knees. You're going to start seeing a hell of a lot more knee injuries when you have 240-pound linebackers who are going to start diving at knees in the middle of the hole, because instead of being able to come chest to chest, that's drag them down. If they slip, that's going to be a hip drop. So I think it's going to be one of those things where the NFL, if they are stupid enough to go through with banning it, they're going to open up a whole new can of worms that it's not going to be a thing that they're going to like, where it's, I almost guarantee it. There will be more injuries from people diving at knees than there has ever been from hip drop tackles.
Yeah. That's all obviously been a topic around the league. I mean, and you incorporate that with how bad officiating is across the board right now. There's just things getting missed every day. I tweeted something out. It might have been last night when I was watching Monday Night Football. I literally don't know what a false start is anymore. I don't. These offensive tackles are getting at least almost, it seems every game I see at least 8 plays where I'm like, oh, well, that's a false start. And it's like, well, no, I guess not. No flag's been thrown. So, I mean, obviously, we could sit up here and nitpick officiating just across the board, but just in general, I think that's something that's got to get fixed too. You say the hip drop, it's like, how about we make everyone actually set and stay there on a play? I mean, it was really exacerbated in week 1 this year, when Jawan Taylor looked like he was getting, a full step off and they weren't calling it. Then they were getting him for not lining up correctly. Yep. And now you're starting to see more of these, offside penalties on the offense. I think it's almost just a mandate from the NFL. Hey, we've got to start calling it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Your guy lining up with your foot, in the neutral zone is such a little advantage, if any. Leaving early as a tackle is a huge advantage, right? Yeah. So the fact that one thing is like, oh yeah, it's more or less at the same time as the snap, so that's okay. But lining up there suddenly is like something that we're going to call every time. I mean, it doesn't, to me, much like policing. Like officiating is, first of all, a lot easier when the rules are clear cut and it's clear which things matter. But since there's always going to be a lot of rules and a lot of gray area with things. Sometimes it's like, borderline. I'm not going to call it because it didn't really benefit. And to me, it's when I was officiating, I tried to make it. I was just trying to prevent a team from getting an advantage. I wasn't looking to call penalties. I would just think to myself, is this the kind of thing that gives you an advantage? Then I'm gonna call it, right.
Mhm.
And the thing is, some of these penalties, they just don't. There's no reference to like some of the pass interference penalties are just silly. It's like an offensive player can push a guy at the top of the route, and that's called quote hand fighting. It's a huge advantage for him on like a comeback route or something. And then a defender is like touching a guy's left hip while he reaches around with the right hand and knocks the ball down, like that happened last night, and got called for pass interference. It's like,
Well,
did his offhand move the receiver a little bit? Yeah. Was the receiver going to get anywhere near that ball? No way. But it's a penalty because, he put his hand on his hip and the receiver turned when he did that. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe, but I think there are plenty of times when they let a lot of physicality go, and other times where it's just randomly they call it. Same with this offensive, the penalty for false start. They, what I hate about it is that when they choose to enforce dumbass penalties like that, like that one's a pretty big advantage. But like the offensive offside, like they choose to enforce that penalty or not lining up correctly or whatever at like weird time in the game or something that's like where it's a crucial play that happened. Instead of we want to get that out of the way early so that the team gets on notice that you're going to call it today, call it a couple times early, and hope that they adjust. That's one thing, but to just not call it the whole game, even though they've been doing it, and then suddenly on like the 38th play you're going to call it, that's not really fair to anybody, and that's not good football.
Well, something that's kind of funny about this whole offensive tackle thing is it's been going on for years. Like probably I can say with 100% certainty, Alejandro Villanueva used to do it all the time.
Yeah,
he used to jump, and I've read on this, by the letter of the law, it is allowed because what basically in essence the rule is, by NFL rule handbook, you can go backwards and your foot can get in the ground as long as the ball is moving before your left foot starts going back, or your lead foot starts going back, basically. So that's the letter of the law. So that's what all these guys have worked, and they've been doing it for years.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous though. Come on, it's like you're not supposed to simulate action at the snap.
No,
and that is clearly simulating action at the snap.
I don't think it should be allowed. But here's what I think happened, because I think it's been going on for forever. John Taylor did it last Super Bowl. I think what happens is everyone's in general pretty used to it. And I think what happens is since that first game was on prime time and Jawan Taylor is a right tackle, was right in everyone's face at the bottom of that screen, and he was kind of teetering the line on like really too early, probably because, you haven't had a lot of time to really get it down pat. So every NFL fan is watching it live on TV, this thing the tackles have been doing for forever. And there was just such an outcry because of it. Now they're throwing the penalties for it when they haven't these years before. Because Villanueva has been, off the Steelers for how many years, and he used to do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, there's a game of the Steelers against the Chargers where the Chargers scored the winning touchdown on a play where the offensive tackle left like almost a full second early. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I'm with you. It's just like I said, it's random enforcement.
Yes.
Why is it a penalty sometimes early in the game and then later it's a penalty or it's not a penalty earlier and it's a penalty later or whatever?
I'm actually surprised that they are enforcing it because, like the offensive pass interference that never gets called, and defensive PI, you get called for breathing on someone.
For nothing, yeah.
It's, the league clearly wants passing offense. That's what they want. They want high scoring passing offenses to, win games.
Why aren't they doing a better job of getting rid of Mike Tomlin? If that's what they really want.
But that's what kind of surprises me is those are, there's going to be some tackles who, when they can't leave early at all, like I'm assuming next year it's going to be no forgiveness. It's going to be from, preseason week 1, it's going to be iron rule. It's going to get called. So there's going to be some tackles who don't have good pass sets who I think are going to, be in trouble from now on. Like guys like, Broderick Jones is one of them. If he doesn't get better on his pass sets, He's not criminal with like leaving early. That is one thing. He's not a vet in that aspect yet.
Yeah.
But
by the way, he got nailed by his quarterback. Oh no, that wasn't. I'm sorry, that was it happens with the Steelers. The way that they have a tendency on offense to work the play clock down to like 0 before they snap. It's totally irritating. I'm not really sure the reasons for that. I guess it's because time of possession, yada yada. But if you get it all over the play clock all the way down where the defense knows you have to snap it right now. Like TJ Watt got a sack this week because the quarterback in the other team was taking it to the last second, and TJ jumped when it went to zeros on the play clock. He just went because it's either going to be a delay of game or I'm going to get a good jump, and he blew by a tackle that ordinarily was getting in front of him. So yeah, I feel like that. This is a feature of the Steelers offense. By the way, I just wanted to mention that bugs the hell out of me. That hopefully someday will change before I'm dead.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot about it, and I wanted to talk about this game. Did either of you happen to catch the end of the Commanders-Rams game?
Oh,
thank God, no.
I did a little bit, yeah.
So Washington was down 2 touchdowns. They hit a bomb, and they get on the 1-yard line with 4 minutes and 50 seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
They did not score a touchdown until there was 1:38 left on the clock, where they were they had their timeout. They had 1 timeout or 2 timeouts, like something where like they couldn't really afford to just sit on their hands. But so they get stopped. They run the play clock to 0. They get stopped. Run the play clock to 0 again. They have 13 seconds left. Let it trickle to the 2-minute warning or something. Like they let the play clock run to 0 every single time. Then they missed the extra point. Then I think they did the onside. Even if they got the onside, like I didn't
realize that game ended up that close because I stopped watching before the end of the game. Yeah, so
but yeah, it took 3. Emery Hunt commented on it. It took 3 minutes for them to score from the 1-yard line because there's a PI on 4th down. So they got 8 plays out of it. I'm pretty sure 7 plays.
And then they ran out of time. Yeah,
it took 3 minutes for them to score from the 1.
No, that's like calling 3 timeouts and then kneeling afterward.
Yeah.
Calling 3 timeouts on defense and then taking a knee when you get the ball on offense, like certain team did this last week. Did we talk enough about this Steelers game against the Colts? I guess we did, right? Do we have to talk about it more?
Was there anything else to say?
I mean, is Mitch Trubisky is the? I guess here's the question. I'll just ask it. You probably know what my answer is, but do you think the Steelers would? What's their Steelers record in the last 3 games if Kenny Pickett is healthy and finishes all 3?
I mean, I don't think we win this one.
I'm saying they were 0-3. So what? How many did they win with Kenny Pickett versus?
I think we probably win the Patriots game, and that's it. And even then, you never really know because they're just 2 very different players. But I would say the Patriots game, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just say that it's like Mitch makes plays in the Patriots game that Pickett probably isn't going to make, and then he has turnover that Pickett maybe not going to make. I feel like they get to the same place from different routes.
They're 2 cheeks of the same ass.
Winner.
Adept analogy.
Is this for PTI? You'd get ding ding ding. Yeah, totally.
I mean,
and then Mason Rudolph's whatever comes out of there.
Oh my God. People are like, oh, thank God they're putting Mason Rudolph in the game. And I'm like, you guys not remember the last time? And irony of all ironies, the last time that I remember him playing against Cincinnati, because someone posted, he's 2-0 against Cincinnati, whatever. And I was like, didn't he get pulled from one of those games and have Duck Hodges came in and saved the day? And he did. The last time he played Cincinnati, it was like, I just remember watching him in the pocket, drifting into the pass rush, throwing completely off kilter and out of balance, trying to throw a deep ball and missing by like 15 yards or 20 yards.
Isn't that what Mitch just did? And it was, straight to the safety too.
But I mean, worse, like he had a guy running a post and the ball just drifted like it must have landed 20 yards away from the receiver. Like it was bad. And he got benched at the end of that series. And then Duck came in, threw a long touchdown pass, led another couple of drives later in the game, and they beat Cincinnati. But it's like, yeah, but Rudolph is 2-0 or 3-0 or whatever against Cincinnati because he started the game even though he played like absolute crap. So I can't believe that Cincinnati of all teams is the one he's going to go back against and get another start.
This is a pretty good transition into that Bengals game. I mean, just talking about Mason Rudolph. I mean, maybe he was okay before he got hit in the head with the helmet, but since then, and no, and I'm not even joking about this. His internal clock is so slow ever since that hit. Like before, he was an immobile quarterback with a decent arm. He could, get the ball out of his hands. Now he's an immobile quarterback with a decent arm, except he just sits in the pocket. Like he doesn't scramble. He doesn't really move. He just kind of drifts. Like the people clamoring for, Mason Rudolph, he's basically Mitch Trubisky, but he actually can't even run away. Like instead of dropping his eyes and running into a sack, he's just going to get sacked for maybe 4 more yards. So, I mean, we're about to rely on a guy who not a single other team even wanted. Not on their practice squad, not on their nothing. Not a single other team wanted him. Crawled back to the Steelers, and now people are like, "Oh yes, Rudolph's here, just in time for Christmas."
Well, so I had a cousin.
Jeremy hasn't had time to say anything for like an hour. Sorry, Jeremy. Go ahead, man.
No, you guys are good. I like the feedback, but so cousin texted me, because I'm going to be seeing him this weekend, likely for Christmas. He said, "Oh, Rudolph, just in time for the Christmas holiday, right?" And I said, "Yeah, well, he'll be lucky if he gets the sleigh off the ground." And I mean, honestly. You guys joke with all the people clamoring for Rudolph. Boy, I mean, right now I'm clamoring that not a single quarterback is back next year in Pittsburgh. Like I want to clean
from your lips to God's ear.
Yeah, like seriously, I would just want a clean slate or whatever. Like really, the only guy I'd be okay with being back is Pickett, and that's just because he's under contract and he's really not that expensive at the end of the day. So I mean, I would really hope Pittsburgh would go out and maybe try to get a veteran. I don't know. That's not their MO though. That their MO has always been go get a guy in the draft, which is.
Hey, I'm gonna let you talk for longer, Jeremy. But I mean, to me, it's like it would be hard. It's not impossible. It would be hard to draft or sign a couple of guys that are worse than the guys they have now.
Whoa. This is the team that took Tanner Morgan as their priority undrafted free agent. So I would kind of pump the brakes on that thought that you have.
You're right. You're right. It's always possible. It's always possible. I mean, if they picked random quarterback names out of a hat of available quarterbacks, you took all the available quarterbacks and you pick 3 names out of a hat, the chances of those 3 guys being worse than the 3 guys we have now is like nil. Sorry, Jeremy. Please, I promise to stop.
No, but I mean, you guys are right though. What I want for Christmas is a blank slate at quarterback, and we're just going to be stuck with, Pickett for at least another year probably, because they're going to just be like, well, we got to give the guy a shot. Maybe one more year he starts to pick things up, even though I think we all have significant doubts about that. I think the fan base now, you used to have a bunch of at least Kenny apologists out there, and it's like those are going, there are less and less of those by the day. I mean, I think there's still an outside chance we're going to see Kenny play this week. He logged a limited practice today. Not saying that that's what I want to see. I don't know. I mean,
I hope so.
Him and Rudolph out there just because Rudolph is a failed experiment. I can't believe he's on a roster either. I'm surprised we took him back, honestly. I thought this was going to be the year we were finally going to dump some of the trash that we had been keeping around. And we were like, no, screw it. We'll give you vet minimum to come back. Which, I mean, vet minimum at the end of the day is not that bad. But it's like you have all these other quarterbacks around the league that are playing pretty good for being back.
So you just look at the guys that were available that got signed this year that ended up starting and were better than what we have. I'm dead serious. They could pick 3 random quarterbacks out of a bag. I'd be happy.
Yeah, I mean, 2023 in a nutshell is year of the backup quarterback. I think there's only been 2 quarterbacks that have played, in every game possible.
Ironically, Lamar's one of them. And
Yeah,
he had the injury prone label.
yeah, I was about to say Lamar is one of them, and then I can't remember who the other one is. I think it's Mahomes off the top of my head. I don't think he's missed any time this year, but those are the only two quarterbacks that haven't missed any time outside of just being benched because the game's out of hand. They haven't left the game due to injury or anything.
Yeah.
So just, I know you guys were kind of in the mode of where, I think Pittsburgh's on the edge of what you could call a total rebuild. I kind of lean the other way just because there's enough talent on this roster, I think, at the end of the day. But from a team chemistry standpoint, I think you almost have to. Like this George Pickens crap is just unbelievable. Deontay bitches every time a ball isn't thrown his way. Just the body language really across the board. If your name isn't, Watt, Highsmith, Hayward, Minka, outside those guys,
Jalen Warren.
Warren. I mean, there's a handful of guys where it's like we know we're getting everything from them every play of the game. So
the only way I'll say this, you mentioned the talent where you lean the other way. For me to see us being contenders, or even playoff contenders next year, I think it has to be a different head coach, because clearly this group of guys are not meshing with the current head coach. Now, you can put the blame on the players, you can put the blame on the head coach, but just if you want to rebuild, doesn't really matter who your head coach is. Just straight up doesn't. It actually services us that Tomlin's so conservative because it loses you more games. So it actually lose us more games and get us higher draft picks. But if you want to use this group of guys, clearly George Pickens isn't bought in. He's a sophomore. Deontay Johnson, not bought in. You have another year of him. Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, maybe, but they've gotten less productive over the course of the season. I mean, how much of a coincidence is it that they're just playing a lot? I don't know. But, I mean, this is one of those things where I think this group is talented. We said at the beginning of the season, I'll still stand on that this is a talented team, but the coaching's just let it down in numerous ways.
I think the coaching overall is terrible, top to bottom. There's some talent, but it's wafer thin. I think the depth is terrible on this team. That's a big difference that I notice with teams that are really contending teams is I just have envy about their offensive defensive lines. They have major injury, like, oh my God, like their defensive tackle or their left tackle is going to go down. And then they trot out a guy and you're like, oh my God, like the Eagles, the rich get richer, but the Eagles draft from this last year, they drafted Nolan Smith and which Brown twin, I forget, Chase.
Sydney.
And it's like, so they have some injury, they're losing a really good player. Then suddenly like they bring in a guy who's a stud. It's like, we don't have that luxury in Pittsburgh. So
we signed Minnesota's backup center to be our starter.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and our guards were, guards that the other teams didn't want. I mean, it is.
I do want to say something about the O-line. I think O-line, more than a lot of people think, is a coaching, like, it's a product of coaching, it's a product of scheme, it's a product of what they're being told to do. Because in the NFL, these guys have been around the block. Like Daniels has been with another, a bad team, but he's been with another team anyways. Samalea has, with the best offensive line coach in the league by far, Jeff Stoutland with the Philadelphia Eagles. And, Daniels got worse. Samalea's gotten worse. And it's not where, those guys were with other teams. They can, our guy's Pat Myers. It's not like Pat Myers or whoever the hell's telling them what to do. If he tells them to do something, they can't just not do it. I mean, that's not how the league works. You do what you're being told.
Yeah.
So, add that to another one of the laundry lists long of issues of why keeping Canada this year was a bad idea. But I think the O-line, I think we need a center. I think we probably need a left tackle. I don't think they address that. But I think that it could be a much better looking group with simply another offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, scheme from top to bottom offensively is just got to get completely thrown out the window. They need a complete reset on offense. But We could go down this rabbit hole for quite some time.
And we have.
Yeah, as Barry say, kind of need to move on here. There's a game this weekend to be played against the Bengals. It is at home. We touched on the fact, who we might think is playing quarterback. Rudolph's, preparing like the starter. Pickett's been out there in limited capacity so far. I'll say one area where I think it got easier for our offensive line is it looks like DJ Reader is going to be out for a little while here, as well as Jamar Chase.
But Chase, they haven't ruled out. They said it's a possibility that he will play.
Yeah, it's a separated shoulder. So
Ben played. He threw with his separated shoulder.
I give you that.
So it's possible.
Yep. So I'm not saying he won't play, but I just the window is there for him not to play. I think Reader's on IR now. I think they lost him for the year.
Here's the thing, Jeremy. The Bengals are in what must-win mode. Like they pretty much are to the point where they have to either win out or close to it to have a shot. And I think I think that definitely factors into whether guys will play or not.
Yeah, for sure. Other than that, there's not too much as far on the injury report. Najee didn't practice today, but I don't think he's been practicing most Tuesdays with just a lingering knee issue. Trenton Thompson did not play. I think that's worrisome just when you consider how, like you said, Will, we're paper thin when it comes to depth.
So who were the safeties in practice today?
I don't know. Meek is out. This week they've already said he's out.
So that would be Miles Killebrew and
who?
No one. It's got to be either Darius Rush, Chandon Solomon because he's suspended,
or Patrick Peterson.
Peterson has been playing free safety this week.
Because he's suspended. Minka's out. Thompson didn't practice. Neal and Riley are still on IR. So that's it.
And then Isaac Samalo did not practice today either with a shoulder. So just we're all banged up in all the wrong areas. But as far as
at least we got the extra day off till Sunday. Whoops. Wait.
Yeah, no, another Saturday edition of Steelers football coming at y'all this week. But honestly, if there's one guy that still scares me a lot is Joe Mixon. The dude's been playing extremely well recently, and one of the big reasons why the Bengals are winning more is they're starting to trust their running game more. Chase Brown has gotten a few carries here and there and looked like a capable NFL backup running back. He had a big touchdown for them. I think it was against the Vikings maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe against someone else 2 weeks ago. I can't remember who. But, for as bad as our tackling has been, for as easy it has been for teams to run on us, Joe Mixon is definitely a guy to watch out for. And I'm torn because I need Joe Mixon to play well in fantasy football. So seriously, I won a matchup by 1 point, like 3 points yesterday, all because DK Metcalf did not catch one more ball in last night's game. But anyway, Joe Mixon's a guy we need to watch out for. What are the other matchups we need to be on the lookout for?
So we always kind of talk about this going the other way, where we say, "Oh, Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, they're great linebackers, they can cover." Well, Will pointed it out last time. They give up monster games to Pat Freiermuth basically every game they play. They also are just horrendous against tight ends in general. Like they're 32nd in the league against tight ends this year. That's inexplainable, to be honest, with the safeties. They have three. So Nick's DJ Turner, we saw as a slot guy. Cam Taylor-Britt, IR, we saw as a slot guy. Mike Hilton, slot guy. Jordan Battle, a guy to match up with tight ends. Dax Hill, slot guy. All those guys should be able to guard corners. Then you've got Logan Wilson, guard tight ends. Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt should be able to guard tight ends. Akeem Davis-Gaither was a guy who ran a fast 40 coming out, should be able to guard tight ends. Devin Harper, one of Will's favorites, guarded tight ends. And somehow they're 32nd in the league against tight ends. So
it tells me they want to give it up. Tells me that they basically are doubling outside receivers and the slot wide receiver, and they're letting your tight end get yards against them because they feel like it's the least bad thing they can give up. That's what I think.
But so I mean,
anything else? Their talent, they have immense talent in the middle of the field. So
if we can, deliver the ball to Pat, we could get a pretty big game out of him. I don't know if it equates to touchdowns. I don't know if it will equate to, any meaningful yards. Maybe it's just our own 25 to the 50, and then we end up punting. But statistically, Pat should have a pretty big game.
You mean to their 40 and then we punt? You mean to
their
35 and then we punt? Yeah. My matchup would be in the last matchup. I remember the talk was T. Higgins is not himself. He's not come around, and we don't really know if T. Higgins is going to be 100%. And even in the game, it was kind of not a big factor. But T. Higgins is like on fire right now. He looks like his usual self again last week. So to me, that's kind of a big deal considering. I mean, the Jamar Chase thing. If Chase plays, even if he's not 100%, you have to pay attention to him. You can't just ignore who he is because dude can play. In fact, he hurt his shoulder. He came back in the game and he decided he couldn't play, but he didn't look like wouldn't bother to cover. It's not like he after he got hurt, he was somehow you could tell he couldn't run a route or whatever. He just didn't feel right, so he stopped. But if he's out there dressed and on the field, you got to pay attention to him. And if that's the case, then the matchup with the other two guys, because they go really 5 deep, 4 deep, 5 deep at receiver and wide receiver. And so that's a bit of an issue for the Steelers team that's shorthanded in the secondary right now. So if you take Patrick Peterson and you put him at safety, it starts to get pretty dang thin as far as cornerback is concerned in terms of coverage. So I'm a little worried about the T. Higgins matchup. And I mean, here's a question I'll throw to you, Jeremy. We've seen a little bit now of Jake Browning this year, undrafted free agent, right? Who we made the case last time. I couldn't understand why he was undrafted and Kenny Pickett was a first rounder when you look at what their college careers were and who they were coming out as a prospect. Now you've seen him play for a few weeks. Am I onto something? It's like Jake Browning. Would you trade Kenny Pickett for Jake Browning right now?
Yeah.
Well,
so to build on that, I really don't want to know what draftable grade they had on Browning back in the day. If Pickett was a first rounder, I'm not sure I want to know what Browning was either.
And Mason Rudolph was a first rounder on their board. Hello.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
By the way, this is I'm going to make this point quickly because I know we're going to want to move on, but I think the most important factor, if you're going to change coaching, if you're going to bring in a new head coach, even bringing in just a new offensive coordinator, the number one thing I want to know about that person coming in is, were you involved in drafting a quarterback or developing a quarterback? And if so, which one, and who did you like, or who didn't you get that you wanted to get? Their ability to evaluate quarterbacks and develop them is more important to me than what their scheme looks like, or if it's fun to watch, or if it's modern. Or I actually don't care as much as I did 6 months ago. I'm thinking to myself now that the only thing that really matters is I want to know who fought to get Brock Purdy drafted and fought to get him a chance in camp. Who was interested in drafting Will Levis, despite the fact that most teams were sort of south on him. Who stood on the table for Patrick Mahomes, et cetera. Right? I'd rather draft someone, or rather get a coach like that who is going to come in and say, I learned from this process when we did it, and I made a mistake before because I valued this over that, and I'm never going to do that again. I want somebody who can contribute to that in a meaningful way, because otherwise you have Art Rooney too, who is not a football guy. You have, a brand new GM who may have a lot of ideas about what to do with quarterback play, but isn't really a guy that, I'm going to necessarily know is going to know quarterbacks backward and forward. And, your coach, maybe Andy Weidel, throws a name in there. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that future. Yes, I think they should start bringing new quarterbacks in, whether it's, you're keeping Kenny Pickett and you're drafting in the mid rounds this year, or you're adding a vet, but maybe next year you're drafting a quarterback, whatever. If you don't draft the right one, it's even worse. It just gets worse. You draft the wrong one.
Yeah, no, you couldn't be more on point on that one. Obviously, there's, that's the big question is how much change is there at the end of the year. And I think the only way for that to really keep going is if we keep snowballing here with our losses. If we truly don't win another game this year and Mike Tomlin finishes the year 7-10, how deafening is the crowd, the fan base, just from top to bottom too, because it's not acceptable to not win or to have a winning season. So at a minimum, we have to at least get back, to our never had a losing season bullshit that we like to champion around Pittsburgh. So let alone maybe try to win championships. I can't remember who I was listening to the other day, but they basically said, you got to hold it on Tomlin for everything because it feels like the game has completely passed him by. They don't have any coaches that anyone wants. Historically, the Steelers don't spend on their coaching staffs. That's the other issue there. But we could be on this for days.
Bad teams, don't be scared of being a bad team for a year. Bad teams have brought the Steelers. Joe Green, Terry Bradshaw, Chuck Noll, Ben Roethlisberger was the last. Ben Roethlisberger drafted after the last losing season the Steelers had.
Right.
It's like if you want some really great players in your core and you want to, it is the league is designed this way. That's why some of these teams that are great now are great. They were bad. They viewed rebuilding as an important part of the process rather than trying to always be pretty good.
Yep. Yeah. Well, since you're on the topic of great teams, let's move on to some good teams around the NFL that actually play this weekend. So we're going to dive right in here. Probably the game of the week is Baltimore heads out to San Fran, take on the 49ers. Obviously, there's a lot on the line for both those teams. You've got two number one seeds currently going at one another. San Fran at home is favored by 5.5. Corey, I'll let you start off on this one.
I think they're very similar. I'm inclined to go with the home team on this. 5.5 seems larger than I would assume. I feel like they're pretty even. I would have guessed a standard 3-point home spread, but I'm not going to overthink this one. I'm going to take the home team, but at a neutral site, I think I might be more inclined to take the Ravens.
Will, chime in.
I think I'm sorry. What's the name of the Ravens running back that got injured?
Keaton Mitchell.
Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell. I think that's they've now lost their two running backs that they had who have speed, and that speed element I feel like was an important part of the difference between maybe where the Ravens were offensively, a couple of years ago and where they are this year. Yes, Todd Bowles has been a big addition in terms of running their offense in a way that utilizes their skill players more. But I think that there's with someone like Keaton Mitchell or with who's the running back from Ohio State that was their starter originally,
J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, so with guys like that in the mix, I feel like it could match up pretty well with San Francisco. But I kind of think this game, the Ravens are always tough. They're a tough out, so it could be a close game. But the 5.5 doesn't really scare me because I think San Francisco is kind of running on all cylinders right now, and I think the Ravens will have a hard time keeping up with that. They will score, they'll play their game, but I can see San Francisco, getting a little lead on them, and the Ravens not being able to boat race with them.
Yeah, I like the 49ers here for another reason. If there was ever a team to get you prepared for Lamar Jackson, it was Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. Two guys that make their living off of not staying with scripted plays and, just ad-libbing and hoping people get open and winging the ball around. So I think San Fran is remarkably already prepared for Lamar just because they already, prepared for basically the exact same type of player with Kyler and his ability to create on his own. I like San Fran here in the points. Kyler had a little bit of success ad-libbing before 49ers kind of shut things down. I kind of see it going the same way. I think you're going to see a game that's close probably to the like mid third quarter, and then you're going to see the 49ers all of a sudden up 2 scores and forcing Lamar Jackson to pass. I'm still just not a big fan of their offense. I know they've got plenty of talent there. It's more of just Lamar making the right plays at the right time, and just you see him all the time just hoping that his legs are going to afford him an opportunity. And this is one of those defenses that is not going to afford you that opportunity. So I like the 49ers here. I'm not going to say a whole lot more there. But another big game heading on this weekend is, especially after both teams, well, one lost in embarrassing fashion, one the week prior. Dallas has headed to Miami. Miami is a 1.5-point favorite. Will, I'll let you start off on this one.
That's a tough game to pick. I mean, I would say history sort of makes me feel like Dallas will bounce back a little bit here. Miami's a very good team, but I don't know that they can. To me, Dallas's Achilles heel is on defense is run at them, over the entire game, and I wouldn't put it past Miami to design a unique game plan that's different than what they usually do, to try to attack, especially with Tyreek Hill. I mean, was Tyreek Hill going to play in this game?
He should be. He was borderline this week, so he's probably going to be good next week.
So I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it'd actually be a lot closer game than last week with Buffalo, but I'm going to take Dallas. I'm not a big, Dallas to me is a bit of a paper tiger, hyped up a little bit by the, public and sports talk, but I think I'll take Dallas to bounce back in this game. And I like Miami and I like watching them, but I'm sort of semi rooting for Dallas to win this just so that week 18 game can be Miami against Buffalo for kind of all the marbles. That's a game probably if Miami loses to Dallas, it looks like week 18 means Buffalo would have a chance to win and win the division or lose and be out. So it's like an extra playoff game for fun. So I kind of feel like Dallas fulfills their part of that scenario.
Gotcha. I like Dallas here too. One, coming off an embarrassing loss like that, where James Cook, had a career high rushing game, just shredded them in every sense of the word that shredding can possibly be mentioned. And whether it's him running the ball, him catching out of the backfield, this needs to be a get right game for Dallas. And honestly, I'm still shocked that Miami can do what it does with the offensive line that it has. And now that you have a team that's pretty good at rushing the passer and making things in general difficult to run the ball. I know they got ran over this past weekend, but that's just an even bigger reason why they're going to be up to the challenge this week. If anything, if you just stop Tyreek Hill, I feel like you can stop the Miami. Now, obviously, gargantuan task in stopping the league's best receiver. I mean, shoot, before missing time, he was on pace for a 2,000-yard season. He's got quite a bit of work still if he wants to get in that realm.
But just quickly, Jeremy, here's the thing about Miami. They're a very weird case. We all think, wow, Miami, what a good offense they are. They have a quarterback who's pretty good. They have an offensive line that is, their skill players are really good. Like I was talking about, I'm not sure they can run the ball on Dallas the way that Buffalo did, but you look at the guys they have, they could. I mean, they're loaded at running back, they're loaded at wide receiver, their tight ends are pretty good. It's amazing to me, though, without offensive line and quarterback, which everybody in the league would tell you are way more important than the skill players. So interesting note to what you just said.
But yeah, just in general, you're right. They do have the skill players. But I just think this is a get right game for Dallas. So Corey, what are your thoughts on this one?
I like Miami in this one. I don't think Dallas can hang with the Miami receivers. I think one thing to point out, I have Jalen Waddle in fantasy. He's been okay this year, hasn't really done too much. He's been serviceable. 8 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown the game Tyreek's out. If him and Tyreek are playing at the level Waddle did last year, which is what he did this last game, I don't know if anyone can stop them. Straight up, those are 2 speed guys who get creatively schemed open. They're not just being told the run goes. So with that little emergence of Waddle, if the Miami can run the ball at all, I think it might be a thrashing. I think they might beat Dallas big, but I will still take Miami to, win and obviously cover.
Here's a quick question. I think to me, Miami's passing scheme is designed to beat linebackers and possibly safeties, but they're running that wheel. They're running that route combo with like a post and a go and a wheel coming from somebody, and it's always like they're out leveraged a linebacker and trying to get that wheel to beat the linebacker. So they kill teams that don't really have the linebackers who can run with that.
Well, and what's interesting about the Cowboys is one of their linebackers is Marquise Bell, who's a safety who can run and cover. But the other one's Damone Clark, who is more of a run stuffer and is a very tight-hipped downhill linebacker. Yeah. And I would be willing to bank on, it'd be curious to see if DeMarvion Overshown's on IR, though. I was about to say that might be a game where he would get some run because this kind of team he's kind of
perfect matchup for him. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But looks like they only have Damone Clark, and then their backups were Sean Evans. So I would bank on Miami finding a way to exploit those matchups and kind of, even if it's Marquise Bell doesn't have Waddle or Tyreek speed to run with either. I mean, there's not really any linebackers who do. So,
no. I mean, it's more like you gotta avoid letting yourself get out leveraged by the motion and formations. That's
Tua actually doesn't. There's a ton of downhill throws. It's the most other than Purdy, but those two are actually a little similar where they're just kind of, this is going to sound ludicrous. They're kind of doing what the Steelers are doing on deep balls where it's not like a long developing crosser. It's hit the back of your drop and throw. Now, there's a big difference in Kenny Pickett doing that and throwing to, we're scheming those up for Connor Hayward, where the Dolphins are doing it with Tua, who's better than Kenny, and throwing it to Waddle and Tyreek. So that's the big difference. But, Tua doesn't hold the ball. It's hit the back of his drop, trust that your guy wins with speed, which happens 90% of the time, and that's what they go with.
Sure. Corey, would you take Michael Penix in Miami next year? You think that would be an upgrade?
If I am Miami, I mean, him and Tua
a fit for them, is it not?
People say just because of the lefty motion, but how often do you see Tua roll out or have to escape? It's very similar to what Penix did in Washington, even if it's with different schemes. Penix was really just uncorking go balls to receivers that are better than the corners he faced. Right. But, I've
had that in Miami more or less. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I have a lot of concern with Penix, but if he landed in Miami, I mean, that's more than enough. That's a great fit. Plus, people say it's tough catching from a lefty sometimes. Like, the ball spins differently when a lefty throws it. It's a bit jarring. So, give that another reason for Miami to take him. Now,
look at Jeremy. Look at the expression on Jeremy's face. We're talking seriously about Michael Penix being in the NFL, and he's just like, "Oh my god." Sorry, go ahead, man.
Oh, I mean, honestly, guys. I consider that one of the greatest crimes in IU football history is that we let Michael Penix walk out of the building and go somewhere else. I mean, I know our offensive line coach was horrible. Our offensive line was bad. Our coordinator was bad.
And he was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, Penix was not bad, really. I mean, he was not Washington good. But I mean, we have not ever seen someone throw the ball like that in Bloomington since like Trent freaking Green and Antoine Randall. I mean, like that's how, good Penix is in that Kalen DeBoer system. And he had 1 year of that in Bloomington where it looked like, oh shit, we've really got something here. And then everything fell off the wagon once DeBoer left to go back to Fresno State and now is at Washington playing for a national title. But I mean, you guys don't have to preach to me about Michael Penix. I mean, I remember, that was my last semester at IU as we got him to come up to us after decommitting from Tennessee after Tennessee said he wasn't good enough to play there. But
he would have done good in Tennessee's system. Well, I don't know. That was 8 years ago or something, whenever he committed or he would have been committing. But the Tennessee nowadays is also pretty similar to what he's doing in Washington, where that ball's not lingering.
He's one of those cats. We'll talk about this at draft time, but he's one of those cats. Fit will totally matter. There'll be like 3 or 4 teams where if he goes to that team, I think he could be pretty good. And the other 28, not so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. Well, let's get to a few more quick games real quick. Detroit's heading Minnesota. Interesting playoff moniker here. Obviously, it's a divisional game. I don't believe Minnesota can catch them anymore when it comes to who's going to win the division crown, as one's 10-4, the other 7-7. Well, especially if Detroit wins, obviously. But Detroit favored by 3. I'll take this. Detroit's finally starting to get on the right path of things. They had a few games where they just weren't playing up to their potential. Feels like they're kind of on the right path now. I know they haven't exactly played Murray's-Row the last few weeks, but I like what Detroit's doing with Jahmyr Gibbs. Just big explosive playmaker. So I like Detroit in the 3 there. Corey, what are your thoughts on this?
I really like Detroit, and it's for one very simple reason. So last year, the big thing to stop Jared Goff, which Jared Goff's been playing good football in Detroit, he was blitzed more than any other starter, and he had a career year last year. Basically, the kind of word or the kind of thing with the Brian Flores blitz all the time defense, because they're playing a completely different defense than everyone else in the NFL. They blitz like 3 or 4 times more than any other team. Is people say it shows you what kind of quarterback you have. If you have a good quarterback, he's going to look good against Detroit. If you have a bad quarterback who can't handle a blitz, he's going to look horrible. Or versus the Vikings, he's going to look horrible. So just because Jared Goff has seen so many blitzes over the last 2 years, just because he's not a mobile guy, that's how you're supposed to beat him. I think he's, kind of like another former Lions quarterback where if you blitz him, you're just going to get carved up just because he saw it so much. Just because he's not a mobile guy doesn't mean he can't get the ball out of his hand. If you take that out of the Vikings, that kind of blitz and rattle your quarterback aspect of their team, they don't really have much left. Their offense is not dynamic, especially at this point. So I'm going to go with the Lions comfortably to cover.
By the way, the Vikings can catch the Lions. If the Lions, because they play the Lions twice, believe it or not. They play them this week, and then they play them in the final week.
Okay.
And if Detroit loses the middle game, which I think is to Dallas, so it's not ridiculous that if Minnesota wins this game, they could still win the division. But I'm trying to figure out how Minnesota is still in the playoff race. How are they still in a contender to win the division with 3 games to go? Like, I don't know. Like, are they just a team that's better than we perceive them to be, or is it just like somehow they've just lucked into this position where they're still in it? I don't know. I feel like they're a little bit like the Steelers. They seem to be. Just when I think they're exposed, once in a while they play a game and you're like, oh, I guess they could win. So I don't know. I think I will take Detroit because it's chalk, but would it surprise me to learn that Minnesota matches up well against Detroit and can beat them in a division game? That just seems weird. I don't know. Could come down to the last week. If Minnesota wins, I could easily see Detroit losing to Dallas. So it could be fun.
Squeeze in one more here. Saints head to the Rams. This is a matchup of 2 7-7 teams. Both teams really need this. If the Saints want to get back in front of the AFC South, they need to win today. But the Rams have, come on here lately. And I actually made a prediction on a different podcast that I think they're going to make the playoffs just because they kind of finish out here pretty easily after the Saints here. But Rams are at home, favored by 4. Go to you first, Will.
I got to take the Rams. The Saints played pretty well last week, but on the road against the Rams are, hanging around, right? I feel like the Rams would be a good spoiler. I'm not sure they're really going far in the playoffs, but they got a couple of guys that can step up and win a game for you in the playoffs in the right matchup. So I think they're, going to protect their playoff position by winning this week.
Okay, Corey.
Yeah, I just don't think the Saints. They've won 2 in a row, but I don't think they're very real games. Before that, they lost to the Vikings, the Falcons, and then they lost to the Lions at home. Not awful, just a bad stretch. But then they beat the Panthers and the Giants. So just those wins just don't really move me. Meanwhile, the Rams beat the Seahawks. Okay win. Destroyed the Cardinals. beat the Browns handily. And the Browns have not been a bad team. Then they lose a 6-point loss to the Ravens. Then they win a gritty one against the Commanders. They were, it was a bigger win than the final scoreboard shows. So I think the Rams are just better now making playoffs. I'm not sold, but they are a better team than they were to start the season. It's kind of crazy that they're even, 7-7 after how trashed their roster got after dumping all their money into Ramsey and Donald and all these guys to make that Super Bowl run. But it shows what drafting well can do. And when you have a million picks in the back end.
Yep. No, I have to agree with you guys. I like the Rams here. Main reason is if you look at Derek Carr, he is a yin and yang type of quarterback this year. After he plays really good, he just throws in a really gut wrenching, why is he still in the league type of performance. But there's no in between for him. He either plays like the guy we knew 2 or 3 years ago in Las Vegas, or he plays like, Russell Wilson of last year. There's no in between. It's just, it's
like the new standard of bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So as where the Rams, they can score and they can score in bunches. So I like a team, especially this late in the year, that one is getting healthier by the day and they can put up points. So I like the Rams. I think they kind of win this one handily. I just don't see the Saints ever sticking up with teams. They can't put up points this year. For as talented as they are on offense, they just don't put up points. So that's where I draw the line there. So that leads us into a
we're forced to pick a game.
Yeah, we're forced to pick one more here. It's just a star matchup this week. I don't know if we can even call it 0 stars, no 5-star matchup, whatever. But Cincinnati Bengals travel to Pittsburgh to take on your Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll go ahead and start off with this one. There's no way in hell we win this game. The only way we win this game is if Pickett somehow manages to put through enough practice this week to where they're comfortable putting him out there. And just from what I've seen today, that because it looks like media was allowed it at least at practice for at least a portion of their practice, he looks pretty slow out there. He does not look like he's ready for a full speed type of matchup. So I think that means Rudolph will start. Rudolph will crash and burn. I don't think there's much optimism for him playing that well, other than the fact that we have some matchups at wide receiver that can exploit their injuries at corner, but you would have to have an offense that wants to use your receivers to exploit those corners. So there's just too much to go wrong. I said as soon as Pickett went down, I really didn't expect to win another game this year. I still don't think we do if Pickett's not out there. So as far as the score goes, Cincinnati's been able to put up a lot of points with Browning. I think that doesn't change. I'm going 34-10. I think we just get absolutely bludgeoned. There's very little buy-in with this team right now. You've got a lot of key players that are hurt. Our secondary has no safety that can actually play safety at the moment, if you want to look at the practice report. So I think they're going to be attacking that early and often. Don't be surprised if Tanner Hudson has like a career day at tight end. So we just can't cover anyone right now if it's not Joey Porter Jr. on someone. So I like the Bengals by a lot, 34-10.
Yeah, I just can't fall for the we'll bounce back. I did this last week where I was like, this seems like a ugly win. Now I'm past that with the state of the current team.
Wait, you started off with playing the reverse jinx, and then you moved into they'll bounce back, and now you finally arrived at no.
Yeah, this one. Well, the reverse jinx worked for a bit. It worked for about 3 or 4 weeks. So, but this is, I don't think the Bengals are even that good, but we just seem so bad. I mean, that's really the bottom line. We're going to be paper thin at safety. We're already paper thin at linebacker. Mykale Walker is supposed to be our coverage linebacker. He can't cover anything. Another example of poor scouting, poor drafting, poor free agency. It's should have been something in the practice squad pool better than signing him midseason. But again, I just can't bring myself to pick. I'm not going to say as bad as Jeremy, if it's possible. I'm going to go 24-10. Something that's crazy about last week is I would say that was the worst the offense has looked all year. And
wow.
I mean, there's so many games to compete with.
And an opening drive touchdown. We would have begged for that. We would have given anything for that the first 5 weeks.
Very say, I don't know. Houston is up there for worst offensive performance of the year. That there was nothing that went right that day.
Well, but consider the only reason we got anything else was because of pump block. And then after that first one, it was just nothing for the entire rest of the game. So I think schematic, even with the Houston game, I think schematically there was something there. It wasn't pretty, but there was some creativity. There's nothing of that now. It's all chalk. There's no attempt to do anything different. We're not even attempting to get, you can argue if it's his effort, but we're not even attempting to get Pickens the ball anymore. And there's just no reason to pick more than 10 points for this game. So 24-10 seems fair to me.
Okay. Well,
I'm going to give you two scores. If Jamar Chase plays, 30-13 Bengals over the Steelers. If Jamar Chase doesn't play, I think it will have a significant impact. I think that it just gets into more like, it's still not a close game particularly, but it could feel a little bit less of a blowout. So I'll call that 23-13, excuse me. I also think Cincinnati's special teams is the Steelers got a little mileage this year out of their special teams with punt block and they're generally solid field goal kicker. But I find games where the other team has a really solid, perhaps even better special teams unit that ends up making a difference in the game for the Steelers, because they're so dependent upon everything working out right for them in a close game. So this could be a week where I think McPherson is actually, dare I say, better kicker to have maybe than Chris Boswell.
I wouldn't say that, but
yeah.
They destroy us on punter.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna say I would say is at least the equivalent of having Chris Boswell. Let's put it that way. And
I wouldn't.
I really, yeah, no, I think he's been money for them. So at any rate, I like their kicker enough, and their punting unit is way better. And it's just the kind of thing where they get a lot of mileage on special teams in terms of making a difference in the game. So there's that. Whatever the Steelers do offensively, I just, in general, Indianapolis to me is kind of like the average NFL team this year. The Steelers are less than that. The Bengals, even with McPherson or with Jake Browning, are a little better than average this year. And I think that's the difference in this kind of a game. It could turn itself into a big score difference if the Steelers play worse than usual because they have worse quarterback play or injuries, and the Bengals, they seem to be rolling a little bit. That was a big win for them last week. That game was totally in doubt. It was pretty much lost, and they came back and won. And they're in the playoff hunt. I feel like when you play a team like that at home down the stretch, generally they're gonna come out firing on all cylinders. You're not gonna get them sleepwalking, kind of like the way they were the last time the Steelers played them.
Yep. All right. Well, 3 predictions for a loss. I can't say I'm shocked.
Which means it's going to be a win somehow.
All right. Yeah. So
Jason Rudolph. Woo!
God. Yeah. The only gift he'll be giving is interceptions across the board. So start that Bengals defense for all you fantasy people out there.
I don't even know it's a lot of picks. I think it's more just like a lot of guy. Just stepping. His pocket presence might be worse than Kenny Pickett's, or Trubisky's for that matter. And that's the thing that's just like so maddening to watch, is just see a guy move into pressure if he doesn't know what to do, throw off the wrong foot. Always like Mason Rudolph to me is just a guy that like never looks like he's right-footed when he's throwing. So he just a drive on the balls to the edges is always scary. It just doesn't get for a guy his size, he doesn't really get the drive on the ball that he should. And then his accuracy to the left and downfield have always been really subpar. At one point in 2019, when he had started most of the games he played, he was number 34 in the league, I think, at throws longer than 5 yards to the left side of the field. So look out for that. Little note.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you all for listening in to another episode here at the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Coleman. You know me as Smith has spoken on the message boards, joined by Corey Karbowski, you know him as Corey39, and Will Massasak, you know him as Bradshaw to Ben. One last thing I'm going to throw in here, guys, and it's more of a rapid fire. We're not diving into this because it's too off into the future. Minus quarterback. Your round 1 pick next year is a Corey.
Specify the question?
Who are you? What position do you need? Do we need the most?
Outside of
Sorry.
I would go left tackle, but cornerback's a close second.
So Broderick Jones is not a left tackle for you.
They don't want to play him there.
Okay, that's fine. No more. Will.
Well, since I can't say left tackle, I think I might have said left tackle as well. I'll say corner. I think if you pair a guy, you get a top flight corner, and you pair him with Joey Porter Jr. on the other side. Like I'd like to get a guy that's better than Joey Porter Jr. So you know if Joey Porter is your number 2, I think you're in pretty good shape at corner, and that would make a big difference for everything, for pass rush, for taking away, you know, the teams from really trying to kill you on the outside, and you can focus your energies on other things on defense.
If we don't draft a slot corner this year, somewhere in the first 5 rounds, then you can kiss the defense goodbye next year, because that's going to be that's our weakest spot. Was our weakest spot before the killer injuries, and every team that has a good defense has a good slot.
Yeah, right. And also Steelers' schedule is going to be worse next year, much harder on paper. So that's another thing. They got a little bit of a schedule break this year, which inflates their numbers a little bit.
Yeah. I'm going to throw inside linebacker. We have
but you got to specify a guy if you want to take, or is this a vacuum? Is this not considered
a vacuum? This is a vacuum. This is not in-depth conversations about whether we need a Mac or a Mike. This is, we need someone to come in and finally replace the hole that Shazier has left.
If you have the same coaching staff, because they seem to be
this is all
dependent on having talent in the middle. I mean, they seem to be so dependent on having talent in order to be successful on defense, right? So
I'll throw a dark horse, though. I would not be against a receiver pick in the first round. I think the top 7 or 8 receivers are very strong. And I think any of them, especially if they have good attitude, which none of our receivers currently have, then that would be nice. And actually, I think it makes them, a little more expendable, where if you spend a first-round pick on a receiver, maybe Deontay and George want to tighten up then. It's kind of like a encourager. Like
I don't think you could really – this question – we could just keep going with a different position, each one of us, every time we go around the circle, because, they kind of need everything, but they need new coaching first, honestly. Then we can really see what we have.
Sure. But, all right, well.
Can we draft a coach? I'll do that first round.
Who would you draft?
I can't draft anybody that already has a job, right?
Yeah, well, let's save that for another episode, guys. It's like we can go into the head coaching search as much as we want to, but until we know what's going to happen, with Mr. Cliche Shades, dude, there's really no point.
But Shades, that's his name. Clichés, get it? Yeah,
Clichés, I like it. Start a hashtag on that. All right, thank you again, and I guess here we go. Hopefully, Rudolph gets off the ground.
Here we go, draft picks. Woo!